Inside of Silksong is one of the greatest games I have ever played. A true 10 out of 10 masterpiece, near unrivaled in terms of presentation, boss design, world design, exploration, and so much more. Also inside of Silksong are a series of baffling design decisions so obtrusive that I don't think I will replay the game without mods to fix its core issues. And no, the most important issue that I need fixed isn't to lessen the overall difficulty, but we'll get to that later. Since I'm an idiot who always sets himself up to be disappointed, I went into Silksong with clear expectations. I wanted another beautiful ruined city environment like the City of Tears, and I wanted another Deep Nest Blight Town moment, where the game separates you from fast travel and makes you fight to escape to safety. All I have to say is, be careful what you wish for. Although Silksong is the sequel to Hollow Knight, it is really the spiritual successor to Dark Souls 1 that I have been waiting for my whole life. You explore a vertically interconnected world with limited fast travel, and unlock tons of shortcuts as you ring bells to open a doorway that leads to the City of Gods. Checkpoints are hard to find, making it feel great when you finally reach safety, and the game isn't afraid to trap you in a dangerous environment separated from fast travel. Certain levels are filled to the brim with traps, which rewards the cautious player who looks ahead for danger. I know people dislike it when reviewers compare everything to Dark Souls, but this game takes so much influence with places like Bilewater being a more difficult blight town that I have to mention it. It feels more like a sequel to Dark Souls 1 than Dark Souls 2 is in terms of the world design. It's not an understatement to say that Silksong has some of the best moments of exploration in gaming. There are many moments where you will be amazed by how the game connects in on itself. You'll see a unique looking environmental detail or item and wonder, will I eventually be able to reach this place from the other side? Then 30 hours later, after you've completely forgotten about it, you'll find that yes, the world does connect in on itself. The first 12 hours of Silksong are mostly linear so that it can wow and amaze you even more when you start finding hidden connections around every corner. The journey this game sends you on is outstanding. You start out by exploring several Metroid-type levels where you'll find grass and lava environments, then bam, you fly straight into a depressing little bloodborne town, and all these stupid bird enemies kill you every time. In order to reach the Citadel gates, you have to persevere through the harsh desert winds and overcome a somewhat difficult boss, which really makes it feel earned when you are greeted by the beauty of the choral chambers and the godly music that accompanies it. And oh my god, the Citadel is fantastic. While the early game was linear, now Farloom opens up and you can go anywhere, and anytime you think you've seen it all, you'll find a new region of the city that feels distinct from the others. One second you're slashing down robots in the Cogwork core, the next you're creeping through the dark halls of the White Ward, learning about the Citadel's torturous past. Silksong also isn't afraid to hide entire sections of content behind secret walls to reward exploration. That's something I love in games. The world design is where the difficulty of Silksong truly shines. I know a lot of people watching this video probably thought Bilewater is where the difficulty went too far, and while I do have a few issues with it, I mostly enjoyed the difficulty of Bilewater. The way this area works is that all of the water is infested, and if you fall into the water once, then you cannot regain any health points until you use your silks to heal the infection once, and it costs 9 needle hits to heal, which can be seen as overly punishing, and it is, but I enjoyed it. The game is trying to make you feel like you are being hunted in a brutal, unfamiliar land where one mistake can lead to death. If you don't like the feeling of being hunted down and having to fight for survival, then you probably won't like Silksong much because it does that very well. For me personally, getting my rosaries trapped in Bilewater was one of my favorite parts of the game, and oh my god, when I finally found that Bellway sign, it felt like a message from the heavens had descended onto my screen. Finally, hope. I did think it was a bit stupid that they hid the only checkpoint in a long boss run here, but I guess they're taking the good with the bad with their influence from Dark Souls 1. And yes, I did complete this area without this checkpoint for some reason. I probably should have just looked it up, but I was very stubborn. Silksong is the type of game where you will think, I wonder what I missed in this level, then you will get lost finding 3 new regions of the map in a row. I also love how the visuals of every area of the map contrast beautifully from one another. I love it when games can have both the most pretty and the most horrifying locations, as it makes the highs and lows of the journey really stand out. And you know what else really completes the exploration? The godly soundtrack. I already knew that Christopher Larkin was good since I use his Hollow Knight soundtrack in most of my videos, but he somehow managed to outdo himself in Silksong. While Christopher did do a great job in Hollow Knight, I don't think he thought those songs would become as popular or as iconic as they ended up being. How would he know that a $15 indie Kickstarter would become his legacy? Now in Silksong, you can tell that he knows this is his legacy. These are the songs that everyone will be hearing in YouTube video essays for the next 7 years, so he put his everything into these songs. The choral chambers, the cogwork core, the whispering vaults, Trobio's theme, it's all so good. Christopher is really good at evoking a feeling of somber nostalgia of something that feels both tragic and beautiful, and those feelings are all over this game. He's also great at the intense moments too. When I die to a boss, I would just think, well, at least I get to listen to the song again. Another thing Silksong does well is that it fixes my overall biggest issue with Hollow Knight, which was the abundance of simple enemy types that you'd fight in groups of 3 or less. Oh no, another enemy with 2 attack combos and weak anti-airs. Simple enemy types can be fun to fight in large groups, but there were barely any combat rooms in the game. I wrote down in my notes when replaying Hollow Knight that there needed to be more combat rooms or more complex normal enemies. Again, be careful what you wish for. This game decided to do both improvements at the same time. Several normal enemies in the early game have more complex movesets than entire Hollow Knight bosses. Many enemies can threaten Hornet from multiple positions. They'll have ground attacks, jumping anti-air attacks, ranged attacks, and more. If you know you're never fully safe with any single position for long, then you're always engaged and ready to move in combat. Silksong doesn't need to throw a ton of enemies at you at one time to engage you in combat with movesets like these, but oh boy, they do it anyways. Silksong may have taken my request a little too seriously. There's a combat room around every corner, some of them being very long, and these stupid birds could go. Although Team Cherry usually listens to community criticism, they did not at all when it comes to the most hated enemy from Hollow Knight. Everybody hated the Primal Aspid. They were so hated they became a meme. They were hard to hit since they're always flying around, and they're hard to dodge as they shoot out 3 infection bullets at a time in different directions. So what did Team Cherry do? They decided to give them a more complex moveset and make them a bird, of course. Now in addition to shooting 3 damage sources, they can also fall on your face if you attack from underneath, meaning the best strategy is to bait out their fall by standing under them, then fight them on the ground, only for them to go back into the air, and then you try to bait it out again, and I'm just not a fan of this enemy type. Of course, the birds being annoying only stick out because the rest of the enemy design is so strong. Even though this is the longest Metroidvania I have played, clocking in at around 70 hours, I never found myself bored of fighting any enemy type, because they're always switching to a new one. Well, maybe all except one enemy type that did get boring to fight, as I had to grind it to obtain rosaries, the name for this game's currency, which brings me to one of my biggest problems with Silksong, the rewards. Part of the reason why I began to grow tired of the overabundance of combat rooms wasn't because they were bad, it's because the difficulty was not proportional to the rewards given. This, in general, is the biggest issue with Silksong. The game is all stick, no carrot. And hey, you might like playing with sticks, but still, a He's got to get a carrot every once in a while. It feels really weird to spend multiple attempts on a difficult 5+ wave combat room to be rewarded with no rosaries. They also almost never reward you with rosaries upon defeating a boss, and the few times you do get some in a chest or a side quest reward, it's usually not a whole lot. Sometimes you might get something cool from a combat room, such as a good weapon moveset like the Reaper, but other times you get nothing other than the way forward, or you grind attempts against this stupid beast fly for 40 minutes just to get a weapon moveset that I'm never going to use. Another weird thing that this game does is it connects new weapon movesets with changing the way you heal. So if you get a cool moveset but the only way to heal is through lifesteal, then you will have a hard time making it your main weapon. It might be better in the future if they make changing your healing method and changing your attack animations separate rewards. Now, the rosary reward problem is twofold. The first issue is that I was not given enough currency to buy anything that I needed despite doing every side quest and exploring thoroughly. So by the late mid-game I resorted to grinding Citadel enemies to buy things. Team Cherry has already made attempts to fix this problem by increasing rosary reward counts, but there is still a second larger problem that is harder to fix. I should get currency for beating every single boss in combat room. It's like Game Design 101 to reward the player for every difficult challenge. I could formulate a logical argument as to why this change needs to occur, but do you really need me to explain why Souls games give you souls for beating bosses? A good mod that rebalances the rosary system, not just to give me enough to buy things, but to give me currency for all boss and combat rooms is what I want most from Silksong. Maybe some items will have to become more expensive to adjust for the change, but with the amount of grinding that I had to do, I don't think there needs to be much of a change. The way I see it, Silksong is what happens when talented game developers spend 7 years inside of their own echo chamber without much outside input. The genius of the mad inventors is certainly there, and so too are the obvious flaws. The high difficulty and extreme punishment in certain areas is also likely the result of this echo chamber. A few too many bosses have long boss runs. The bosses are not just puzzles where you need to figure out their moveset, but endurance challenges. Past the mid-game, every boss just has 10% more health than you would expect them to have. Sometimes it doesn't seem like Team Cherry was trying to create a challenging game for players, but that they were instead making a game that could challenge themselves. Normally, I wouldn't mind this creative choice too much, but what really confuses me is this interview with Team Cherry about Silksong, where Ari says, "We're trying to be really mindful that we want this to be a game that new people can come into and experience as their first Hollow Knight game, that it sits alongside the original game, and the difficulty also sits alongside the game in the same way." If this was Team Cherry's goal, then they failed, flat out. Silksong is so much more difficult than Hollow Knight. I literally broke my controller by sweating too much so the jump button started to stick. Then I had to buy some stuff to loosen up the button, and this happened multiple times. I've beaten most Souls games without leveling, and I've never broken a button with my sweat. So although Team Cherry said that this game would be welcoming to new players, it actually might instead be the hardest game that I have ever played. I know that sounds like an overstatement, but hear me out. Just like in a Souls game, you can use in-game items to make the game easier. Or can you? I don't really think tools do make the game much easier, and they certainly do not make the game easy outside of specific situations. Sure, you can use tools to get some chip damage here or there, but every boss has so much health that you can spam all of your tools and you might still not kill them. And using tools costs you scrap, so you can only have a few tool-only attempts before you have to grind for another attempt. And more importantly than that, all tools don't let you regain health. In order to heal, you have to land 9 needle hits. So if you are overly reliant on tools, you don't get an easy mode. mode. Instead, you get a more stressful mode where you constantly run out of resources and can never heal. The game is more designed for you to learn the moveset of a boss with the needle, and then maybe use some tools on a good attempt towards the end, but by that point you won't really need to use the tools to win because you've already memorized the moveset. Another reason why Silksong is so hard brings me to a big positive about the game. Some Souls games have tough levels, others tough bosses, others tough boss runs, but Silksong has the whole enchilada. The levels are hard, the bosses are hard, the boss runs are hard. A large part of me loves this. I don't really enjoy how modern Souls games have easy normal enemies with tons of checkpoints and then all of the difficulty is shoved into the spectacle boss with a bunch of delayed attacks at the end of an area. In Silksong, the whole world is dripping with tension and fear around every corner, all of those emotions that make me feel like I'm alive even though I died on the inside in 2021. But it's also a bit over the top when all of this high difficulty is combined with high punishment. Another thing that makes Silksong really hard is that, unlike Souls games, build variety will not save you since tools are well balanced, as explained earlier. I respect Team Cherry's decision to not make tools too strong, but then don't you need another way to adjust the difficulty, like perhaps an easy mode? You can mod the game to be easier, but this is not a solution for console players. And in addition to an easy mode, I would like it if there was a normal mode. Silksong starts out in the double damage hero mode that you would expect most games to only let you unlock after clearing the game once. Some mods do remove double damage, but this would make the game a bit too easy for me. I suppose my preferred level of difficulty would be to keep most enemy attack double damage, but remove contact double damage, remove environmental hazard double damage, and lower most boss health pools by 5 to 10%. This would be my ideal normal mode for casual play so that I could replay the game without breaking my controller with sweat. Fortunately, they already have taken out some environmental double damage in patches, and I do think that is a step in the right direction. Overall, I didn't personally dislike the high difficulty since it engrossed me into the world design, although I do want more difficulty options so I can replay the game without all the sweat. Now, I do have larger problems with the difficulty in the endgame, but we will get to that later. For now, I'm gonna get back to glazing Silksong again. Although certain bosses are overly punishing, the boss design of this game is just spectacular. Truly one of the best boss lineups from any game I have played. Silksong makes the brave choice of never giving Hornet iframes on her dodge, and I love that decision. I think invincibility frame-based combat has become a bit oversaturated, especially since it can turn a single move into the correct choice for so many situations. Dodge through the damage source, hit the enemy, dodge through it again, repeat. In Silksong, you have to use your entire platforming toolkit to avoid damage. Although the claw line grapple move might seem a bit overpowered as a large dash, it's well balanced since it requires a strand of silk to use, so if you use it too often you won't be able to heal. That makes every use of the claw line feel impactful, and oh my lord, the boss design is just
perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
In addition to the banger soundtrack, every boss's mechanics have some creative twist to make the encounter unique. The musical Mantrobio attacks you with fireworks and travels underneath the stage floor, and he just feels like you're fighting an entire carnival. The Widow boss is great. He's a bit hard at first until you beat him after 4 or 5 attempts. Then the game's like, you really thought we were done? And then the game turns into a bell bullet hell while a spider thing harasses you. At first I thought, that's it, the game's bull. It's impossible. Then I realized that all you have to do is position yourself towards the center and dodge every attack with as little movement as possible while almost never jumping. It's bad to be by the wall because the bells that hit it are more unpredictable. Once you figure out this strategy, you feel like you become one with the eye of the storm, surviving amidst an onslaught of damage. Another amazing boss are the Cogwork Dancers. Some bosses have a song, but this beast has a whole ass composition. In Phase 1, you learn the dance at a slow tempo. Then in Phase 2, the tempo speeds up. Once you get to Phase 3, you find yourself at the climax of the composition, as the music gets even faster and the dancers start to attack independently of one another. Phase 1 and 2 are like learning to play a song with your right hand on the piano. Then in Phase 2, it's like you include the left hand and have to focus on playing two parts of the same song at once, or in this case, responding to two different boss movesets at once. After you survive this chaotic dance long enough, one of the bosses die, leaving behind his friend to dance alone. The music becomes slow and somber as you conclude this composition on one more emotional final note. This game's bosses are some of my favorite in gaming, and I would love to play through a boss pantheon whenever the free DLC comes out. But do you know what isn't completely amazing in Silksong? The side quests. While there are some fun companion quests to find out there, the actual side quests are not that great. They're very grindy. Collect X of this item from this enemy, or collect X of this item by backtracking through a level. At first I didn't mind them too much because they gave me an excuse to kill some enemies while I re-explored levels looking for new paths. I thought they're an extra reward while I backtrack, and although they are almost never interesting on new playthroughs, I can just skip most of the side quests except for the ones with the best rewards. And then I learned that in order to get this game's true ending, you have to complete every side quest and move the flea caravan to their final location and finish Bilewater. I'm okay with the Bilewater challenge, but do I really have to do all the busy work of completing every side quest on every playthrough where I just want to get the true ending? You might think that the true ending is just one boss, so it's not a big deal, which brings me to the second spoiler warning of the video. Leave now if you don't want any endgame spoilers. So the big surprise in Silksong is that the true ending is not an extra boss like in Hollow Knight, it's an entire third act. Yes, the entire third act of the game is locked behind completing all of those boring, grindy side quests, collecting a bunch of fleas, and breaking your controller with sweat and Bilewater. Completing all of these side quests to reach Act 3 is another thing that I would want to mod out on a repeat playthrough. One of the main advantages of the Metroidvania genre is that they are compact and replayable. Silksong is a Metroidvania with some of the best movement, bosses, level design, world design, music, and art, so it should be the most replayable, but instead Team Cherry went too far with the bloat. When I was nearing the end of Act 2, I was satisfied. I thought, all this game needs to do to conclude well is to have a cool final level area above the Citadel with a cool boss at the end, and maybe have some meeting or conclusion with some of the companions that we have seen throughout the journey. Unfortunately, there isn't a real level at the end, just a final fight with Lace and the Silk Mother. For some reason, the Silk Mother boss is one of the easiest in the game despite being at the end, and then after you beat her, Hornet cocoons herself and is ready to be reborn as the new goddess queen of Farloom. This is Silksong's normal ending, and I don't like it. I don't like how I explored the largest Metroidvania ever to not have a real final level. I don't like that Hornet has to give up her way of life to save the world, and I don't like how quick and unsatisfying it feels. If you do every side quest, you can instead trap the Silk Mother to save the kingdom without becoming the queen. If you do this at first, then the trap will start to suck Hornet in with the Silk Mother, and then Lace saves you and falls with her mother into the abyss. The credits roll again after this ending, but when you go back to your save file, you notice that it's covered with the abyss. You shake off the abyss and find yourself in Act 3. At first, I really loved this. You get to see a new side of the world after everything's fallen apart and succumb to the abyss. The act starts off very strong where you descend into the abyss and find Lace trapped at the bottom. To get out of the abyss, you have to do a really cool escape the lava platforming section where intense emotional music plays. After this, you are tasked with collecting 3 hearts by entering the memories of 3 legendary warriors. You do this so that you can get the power to enter Hornet's memories to retrieve a flower that will protect you from the abyss. And this is also where I start to take issue with the act. In order to reach each heart, you have to backtrack through the worlds, but 2 of the 3 hearts are very hard to discover without a guide. You need to break a breakable wall inside of the Grand Gate elevator to reach one heart, despite it on the map being closer to the forest and desert environments. And to get another heart, you have to remember that there's a hole in the ceiling in this one place in Hunter's March, and going through it creates a connection into the far fields that leads to another heart. When the game tucked away hidden zones with extra rewards in the mid-game, that was great because it was optional and it felt rewarding to find. Making required content very difficult to find either forces a player to do a ton of backtracking or use a guide, both of which I'm not a huge fan of. And then after you reach any of these hearts, you're likely to do more backtracking to get stronger because these challenges are impossible. If you thought double damage made the early game too hard, oh boy, just wait for these challenges. The plant boss isn't too hard, although I cheesed her, so what do I know? But the Coral Tower and Carmelita were really difficult. In the Coral Tower, you have to clear 3 combat rooms in a row with no checkpoints, and they have multiple mini bosses. And just about every enemy type in these combat rooms have completely new movesets and are not seen outside of this area, which is kind of cool that they're hiding an entire army of new enemy types for just one tiny little area, but they do it in a very punishing way. My winning attempt for this was 15 minutes long. I had to pause sometimes to wipe off the sweat from my controller that had built up, and I counted myself having to beat 52 normal enemies and mini bosses combined with 20 weaker fish enemies for a total of 72 enemies without a checkpoint. And don't forget that they add environmental hazards too while you fight the enemies. After seeing this, you may feel inclined to upgrade your needle to max strength, in which case you need to do more backtracking and collect every single flea in the game. And just like before, you are likely to not do this without a guide because holy crap, some of these fleas are just too well hidden. You can buy maps to see which fleas you are missing, but some of these fleas are so well hidden that seeing where they are in the map will not help you a whole lot in finding them without a guide. In one part of the game, you have to find a secret zone that leads you to the Wisp Thicket, which then leads to a secret zone with a crafting material inside of the secret zone. But don't stop there, because there's a breakable wall inside of the secret that leads to the flea. And hey, that is kind of cool, but these moments work best when they are found naturally, and when the game locks one of its most important upgrades behind flea collecting, then you're likely to just end up using a guide. So I used a guide to collect every flea, and then to celebrate, the fleas held a carnival. I then discovered that in order to get the final needle upgrade, I had to get a high score in every single flea minigame at the carnival. This is the moment that broke me. This is where I had to admit that I was no longer having fun with Silksong. 2 of the 3 flea minigames are pretty hard. To their credit, they are well designed, but that's not the issue. Act 2 of the game was already very difficult. Then I had to kill 72 enemies in a row, grind enemies to buy flea maps, collect every flea to get a sword upgrade to do the next impossibly difficult challenge, and even just getting the sword upgrade is another hard challenge. Whether you're designing a game or writing a book, I think both activities can be compared to cooking. You use a variety of ingredients to produce the overall experience that is greater than the sum of its parts. Difficulty is like a spice. It can be used in moderation to greatly enhance a dish, but when used in excess, it can completely ruin the experience. Silksong starts out hot, and then it gets really hot. And I do like spicy food, but then in Act 3, it's like they're just asking you to eat a bunch of peppers in a row. The true final boss of the game might as well be a ghost chili pepper. In Act 3, you lose the great exploration part of the game and just have to do a bunch of difficult things in a row. I lost it at the Flea Carnival not because it was impossible, it was a lot easier than the Coral Tower, but the real reason I lost it is because I collected every damn flea already. already. Let me do a few casual mini games and give me the needle upgrade, damn it. Why is there not a single part of Act 3 that is just fun without brutal difficulty? After getting my needle to its max upgrade, I fought Carmelita, and although she is an amazingly designed boss, I wasn't having fun anymore. She has a billion health points. On her boss run, you have to fight 2 waves of enemies to fight her, which got really boring really quick, and she's just really difficult. Where's the rest of the flavor in this dish? Where's the fun exploration part of the act? Most of the side quests in Act 3 are either very difficult or require a ton of backtracking, and normal enemies turn into shadow variants that drain silk on hit to make backtracking more annoying. Now it's time to talk about the final boss of the true ending. Once you collect all 3 hearts, you use their power to travel into Hornet's memories and retrieve the white flower that can resist the abyss. With flower in hand, Hornet descends back into the abyss to save Lace and Farloom. Lost Lace is the hardest boss in Silksong. While the Coral Tower and Carmelita took about an hour or 2 for me to beat, Lost Lace took around 4.5 hours, and unlike Carmelita, she is not as well designed. Phase 1 of Lost Lace is good. I love the rhythmic duel of Lace's moveset. The abyss adds a few tentacles to the end of some of her attacks, which adds positioning depth to the boss. Then in Phase 2, Lace starts assaulting you with spells and tentacles, and this is where the issues start to occur. I can't see what's happening. In order to win, I have to be focused on Lace and the stage damage at the same time, but everything is black with slight tinges of grayish white. The worst offender of this lack of visual clarity is when the tentacles appear underneath the spinning saw attacks. Although you can see it if you are looking for it in the gameplay, these tentacles are very hard to see in the heat of the moment while you're also trying to focus on what Lace is doing. I just can't see Lost Lace's stage damage well enough for this fight to feel fair. Maybe it would be better if there was a white tinge on the tentacles before they burst out to make them stand out from the black stage more. Once you beat Lace, you learn that actually you did not beat Lace and a bunch of saws try to kill you. This boss has a ton of health. Once you do enough damage, Lace will start hunting you down with AoE slash attacks, and after all of that, Lace is finally defeated. Hornet sees the Hollow Knight as she finally departs from the abyss, and Lace and Farloom are free both from the Silk Mother and from the abyss. The game then still has a somewhat abrupt Soulsy ending where you don't get to say goodbye to any of the NPCs or anything like that, which is an artistic choice I like less and less every time a game does it. It was somewhat cool the first few times it happened as an anticlimax at the end of Dark Souls 1, but now I see it as overused and not always the best conclusion for a long journey. So yeah, I don't really like Act 3. Putting so much difficult, punishing stuff back to back was very tiring, and by the end I felt like I beat Lost Lace more out of obligation because I liked Acts 1 and 2 so much rather than out of genuine joy. Although Lost Lace had a fun moveset, the lack of visual clarity also doesn't make me want to return to beat the final boss of the true ending, whereas the Radiance is still a very fun final true boss in Hollow Knight that I look forward to fighting again on repeat playthroughs. This puts me in a weird position when it comes to replaying Silksong, because I find the ending of Act 2 to not be very satisfying, but I also don't really like the content in Act 3 all that much, even if it's a bit more satisfying. Maybe if I replayed the game, I could find an Act 3 but easier mod that specifically makes that part of the game less sweaty, but then again, it still doesn't fix the main issue, which is that Act 3 is just a bunch of combat challenges without much exploration. A mod could improve Act 3, but it couldn't make the experience as fun as Act 1 or Act 2. However, there is one area of exploration in Act 3 that I had completely missed until after I beat the game and heard about it online. You can travel into the memories of the Green Prince to find lost Verdania, and this was very beautiful. It was everything that was missing from Act 3. A new area with beautiful art, amazing music, and fun exploration. I mean, there weren't any good rewards here, but the platforming was fun. The deer boss was kind of horrible, but ignore that, the rest of it was good. Then I got to the end of Lost Verdania, where I had to refight the Cogwork Dancers with the Green Prince and a ghost. Probably because the Cogwork Dancers were the Green Prince's friends who became imprisoned by the Citadel. That's a guess, I didn't double check it, this isn't a lore channel. Moving on. When I fought the Green Prince and died, I learned that in order to refight him, I had to platform through the entire level, and then I gave up. I quit. I'm done. I don't care if the boss is amazing, and I do think the Cogwork Dancer boss is amazing, but the last 14 or so hours of Silksong have just been a series of extremely difficult and extremely punishing challenges with almost no exploration. I don't care if the challenge is fun anymore. I am just tired. I just can't play anymore. The game was already super difficult in the first two acts, and Act 3 burnt me out so hard. So yeah, this has been a weird essay, swinging from high positivity to negativity back and forth. The way I see it, the actual game inside of Silksong is one of the best ever made, but there are a ton of systems around the game that are not designed well. Not getting rosaries as a consistent reward for bosses and combat rooms, having to do a bunch of side quest busy work just to get to Act 3, a lack of difficulty options, and an exhausting final act all work against what is otherwise a masterpiece in terms of exploration, world design, music, art, boss design, combat design, platforming, and more. When it comes to what Team Cherry should do to balance the game, it's hard to say because I think certain things need to be rebalanced in a manner that is more drastic than what they would be willing to do. I don't think they want difficulty modes even if it could make the game better for more people, because Souls games don't have difficulty modes and this is a Souls-like. I don't think they want to rebalance all rosary purchases and give you currency for every boss and combat room because they think that you would have too much currency and that it wouldn't feel tense enough when you lose some, but that's also like game design 101. If you really need to, maybe make more rewards to buy, or make some of the rewards more expensive, but don't just remove giving me rewards for beating the content. I think they want Act 3 to be a difficult final challenge, but maybe next time it would be better if they balanced these over-the-top challenges with more new level content. And if they don't want to do it, they could just end the game a bit earlier with a real final level that feels more conclusive. I don't exactly know how Silksong will be remembered in the coming years or what changes Team Cherry will implement, but what I do know is this. Inside of Silksong is one of the greatest experiences that I have had in gaming. Even though it's only $20, it's one of the few games that I have felt was worth $70. There are some issues that make me apprehensive about sweating through another playthrough, but with some good mods or patches, this could become one of my favorite games to revisit.